their success in the Yokohama competition is now widely known, and I've just received today the issue of Kenchika Bunka, which actually not only deals with Yokohama, but the oeuvre, many things that we haven't seen before. Alejandro was educated in Spain, Farshid in London at the Bartlett. They came together in Harvard and worked separately for such as piano, but together with Omar, I believe, in Rotterdam. You know, I with many of you, have participated in all the sort of confused experiments in complexity over the last few years, and sort of been caught in all the eddying sways of strong wills and remarkable imaginations. What I think is particularly wonderful about the Yokohama project is the remarkable purity and clarity of voice that they have produced out of this setting of for me, for a while, certainly the last year or so, of extraordinary confusion. I think they suggest the promise of this project in ways that no one else has. So please welcome Alejandro and Farshid.
Does this work? Yeah. Okay, this is a particularly difficult lecture because all the material of the project is across the corridor. So we've tried to put together a little bit of a more theoretical presentation that aims to describe the realm or the domain that we are trying to target in our practice and also in the work that we are developing here in Deep 5. The structure of the lecture is gonna be as follows. I am going to introduce first, try to introduce the context, if you want to call it like that, of our work, and then Farshid is gonna explain the Yokohama project in a way in which perhaps is not explained in the exhibition. The exhibition is more about the the product, and what we've tried to put together is the way in which the project was developed. The first thing that I would like to state as an attitude that we sustain in the maybe we should have the two first slides, please. Can I operate the slides from here, or?
Yeah. The two red ones is forward.
Okay.
Sorry, two blue ones are forward. Okay, so just two blue ones.
Okay. First of all, I would like to state that as an attitude, we don't have much trust in the individual original artist who works secluded from the forces that shape the world around him, and we think that any significant practice can only happen in respect to a certain domain, to a certain space where the work develops and to which the work relates. We are therefore to some extent opportunists. We believe that the relevance of any action can only be measured in the light of specific circumstances. So our work is very much about being aware, about knowing what things are happening around us, and try to produce a certain approach that try to construct or to relate the work in some way to the things that are happening around us. We always, first of all, the lecture was called Practice of Exteriority. That obviously relates to the name that we've given to the office. We always say that we came up with this name while working in Holland, when we discovered one day that our Dutch colleagues in the office were making considerably more money than us, and we went and asked for a raise, and we were answered by the manager of the office that he couldn't give us the raise because our Dutch colleagues were supposed to stay for longer in the office, and therefore they were some kind of investment in knowledge that the office could accumulate. And we were tourist architects, in, in his own words. And one day we would disappear with our knowledge or our experience, and this knowledge won't revert in any profit for the office. So we were very upset at the beginning, but then we thought that given our biography, we would be better off if we try to make a strength out of the situation of being a foreigner, of being an outsider to a system, of not being able to relate precisely to the rules, to the codes that are operating on a certain space. After that, we've thought about the name, and we think that it carries also some other interesting connotations, like, for example, the fact that it describes a spatial position. And perhaps in the 90s, there's no better way of stating an architectural position as through a spatial definition. The same way that in the 60s, an architectural statement had to have some kind of socio-political content. In the 80s, it had to have linguistic content. We think that it is increasingly interesting to look at the practices today in their spatial context. If we start thinking in what practices are local, national, transnational, provincial, continental, insular. I just received the invitations for the Isozaki lecture. He calls it something like, he makes a reference to the insularity of the work. So this is a discovery of another virtue of this name that we think is an interesting nuance. What is the reason for this sudden re-evaluation of spatiality or materiality in respect to, for example, ideological positions or linguistic operations or linguistic values? Well, the reason for this, we think, not only we think, it's something that many other people have already stated, is that the world in which we practice or in which we live, whether we like it or not, is a world where perhaps the most interesting phenomena occur or are starting to take a spatial tinge or a spatial nature. We have read already in many in theorists or analysts that come from different disciplines that what it is already called as a late capitalist regime is a new regime, a new economic and productive system that is producing a type of space that is radically different from the one where modernism developed. The modernist paradigm was basically or rose out of the enlightened ideals, out of the colonial regimes, and it was a system of production and economic integration that was producing spatial structures of this kind. It was using structures that basically allowed for this colonization, for this expansion of the space of capitalism by way of imposing spatial homogeneous structures, as the ones that happen in Barcelona or the ones that were proposed by Hilbersheimer and other modernist urbanists or theorists. What happens and when does this paradigm change? It basically is a paradigm that is very effective throughout the whole beginning of the 20th century, and it has a major breakdown in the first crisis of big crisis of overaccumulation in the 60s, when the world, this infinite world that was progressively colonized by the capitalist system, suddenly become entirely occupied, and there is no more space to keep enlarging the space of the world. At this point in the 68, what start to occur is that the only way that the system can sustain the growth that is inherent to the capitalist system is by introducing mechanisms or techniques of spatial and temporal displacement, as David Harvey has pointed, that what they do is basically create or unfold the surface that existed before into more spaces that can accumulate the excess of this excess of production that the system couldn't absorb anymore because it was entirely occupied. So what happens at this point is that if you can imagine the world as a surface that starts deflating or that starts folding inwards or outwards to produce more spaces for absorption, what this process of unfolding the space creates is the overlap of realities that once were apart, far apart. So at the same time as is a process that in one side of it produces an enormous facility of communication, the globalization of all the economical and social processes. At the other side, it starts revealing important stresses in the when all these different parts of the new surface of the world come together. Phenomena like these ones that happen in Japan, or the one on your right, which is the downtown of Minneapolis, are phenomena that are specific from this new, this emerging space of late capitalism, where the homogeneous grid that Jefferson, as one of the main theorists of this enlightened modernist planning, had invented, is systematically subverted by the commercial developments that start occupying the grid in an absolutely different way. These phenomena give rise to a number of theories or interpretations that mainly aim at the manipulation or even at the production of differences. What the theorists or the architects or the planners that start launching a new, an alternative way of an alternative way of operating to the modernist homogeneous approach. What they see is basically something like what we see here, a section through topography that has been folded innumerable times and that reveals mainly differences. These type of approaches, if we can remember, for example, historicists, neo-regionalists, deconstructivists. Basically, what all these theories that appear at the crash of the Fordist model of the Fordist capitalism are basically tuned up to deal with differences. Now, where do we stand in this picture? What we are interested, instead of thinking that the only way that we can operate is by simply playing or mapping these differences, is by perhaps looking at how these differences have been produced, how these pleats, these folds that have been produced to enlarge the space that the system requires to keep on expanding, have a certain coherence that we don't see when we only look at their representational, at their projection, at their appearance. And that is basically perhaps the main project that we undertake in our practice and also our work here in the school. Is basically the articulation or the development of techniques that will help us to operate in a space that is no longer homogeneous, is no longer only differentiated, but is at the same time continuous, coherent and differentiated. That's where our fascination with some of these, Alan was mentioning at the beginning, these chaotic systems comes from. Instead of what is interesting also of this situation, and that relates to the way in which we can understand these organizations that result, these organizations that we were looking at that result from this unfolding of the surface of the Earth, is the recovery, if you want, of material organizations versus representational techniques. That means that the way in which all these cultural proposals that we were mentioning before as arising in this border between the Fordist capitalism and the late or advanced forms of capitalism, all what they are doing is trying to deal with the problem of construction of differences on a purely representational or linguistic way. We think that instead of looking at this projection of a section of these folds, maybe if we think in their material construction, we will find probably better instruments to deal with the emerging spatial paradigm. These two images correspond to two of our favorite processes or instruments. The first one is the Rorschach. It's, as you probably know, test, psychological test, that rather than assuming representations, assuming that certain images or certain icons have that our psyche is able to recognize certain images or certain figures, tries to propose a series of forms of spatial organizations that collect potential readings in a coherent way. The other one is the series of basic morphologies that René Thom proposes in his structural stability and morphogenesis. So basically, that is the proposal that we are trying to make. That is the reason why, in a way, when we are talking also about going back to a material, to a spatial approach to material practices, we are trying to escape to a situation in which lately, and also as part of this same late capitalist system, there seemed to be an overlap and a saturation of coded materials that, in our opinion, devalues enormously any representational or any strategy that is based on the codification of reality. To explain to you briefly what kind of techniques are we trying to develop in order to operate within this picture that I just described. I'm going to show some of the work that the students, our students here in the unit, have been developing. It's not necessarily the best students, but are the students that were organized enough to give us slides. But we think that it is perhaps better way of explaining what we understand by practices of exteriority, because it is actually developed within the school. It has a didactic purpose, and I think it is maybe clearer to see these processes here than to see them in our own work. Although I mean, we will see later on that there are obviously connections. This is basically we've been working in the area around the Tate Gallery, the future Tate Gallery in Southwark, and what we've asked the students, following this idea of operating as a foreigner or operating from the outside, from the exterior, is to follow a process that develops in three phases. The first one we call, after Deleuze, deterritorialization phase, and it is a phase in which the student is supposed to construct, let's say, a graph or a material organization out of the reality of the piece of urban fabric where they are operating, which is obviously very complex to analyze without a reduction of the parameters that we are looking at. Through that the deterritorialization phase, what we aim for is precisely for the erasure or of all the coded significance or meanings that that piece of material organization carries, and to construct out of it a new one that we can use to operate. That can be the origin of a new code that doesn't relate to any of the codes that were present there. So these graphs are basically made out of looking very carefully, very precisely at one particular aspect of the urban assemblage where we are operating, and it is supposed to be transformed in the second phase. So that's the first phase. The second phase we call a mechanic transformation. By mechanic transformation we mean transformation of this organization that the students have developed out of the analyzing one parameter within this urban assemblage, and intentionally transform this spatial organization into a different one that turns into the code that is re-territorialized in the third phase and becomes operative on the becomes basically the origin of the project. So this particular project was dealing with intensity fields over time, of public spaces over time, and based on a sample that we got from on statistics that we get from the Southern City Council. These maps showing when different intensities become operative, the different codes relate to the amount of people that are occupying the public space in each area from the site at different times. So this is basically the way one of this first phase of deterritorialization is produced, and then the drawing to your right is made out of a section through time. So the vertical ordinate is time, and is how the green area is basically the area that doesn't reach a certain level of people, and this is basically this relates. This is a map on a different extension, which is not the extension of space but the extension of time, of how the site behaves throughout 24 hours. After coming up with this section through time of the regime of the intensity of activity, the aim that is proposed as a mechanic transformation is the generation of a coherent system of activities that are not permanently active but are on an average in a certain area active all the time, and this is the graph that comes out of transforming the graph that you had before on your right, being the red pieces, areas that are added to the existing situation of or basically insertions of urban activities, while the blue ones are when there is a certain excedent of urban activity in one area, and to produce this coherent field, these excedents have to be taken away. So it has two ways, the process. The next map is how this process develops into a precise instruction or code that allows to state precisely how much program, what's the amount of program that has to be inserted at every point of the site and at every time band. And with this map, basically he puts forward this proposal that takes into account also the topographies that are on the site, coming up with this graph that is supposed to to delimit the areas that have to be enhanced with new insertions of program, and the areas that have to be basically reduced in activity, which is again the red and the blue. There is a very something that we would like to remark in all these experiments, which is that we are very interested in being able to state again a position of control over an urban assemblage or a process of planning. That is something that we think has been to some extent neglected in the latest urbanistic proposals. It seems like control is no longer fashionable, that all the urbanists are systematically rejecting the possibility of exerting control, and we think that is also a task that probably we have to undertake generationally. If we want to contribute in some way to the development of the discipline, we have to be able to propose again that we are able to control, to plan, to have a positive action on the environment, instead of saying I can do anything, it's too complex for me. This is another project that starts the deterritorialization phase with a pattern of intersections that then is translated into another pattern that basically maps the areas that are affected by these intersections. There are certain formulas that are applied to this first map and that turn it into that one. The white areas then become the areas that are not affected by any intersection field, and then they are occupied. A certain number of insertions or a certain pattern of intersection is proposed in this process, so that in every point, again, it's a strategy of coherence. In every point of this urban assemblage, there is, or in every area under a certain number of square meters, there are also some comparative studies that support why this size was chosen. Basically, what this map is doing is dividing these white areas into other areas that are under the area that it is defined as needing to have an insertion of an intersection. Then the author takes each one of these bubbles where a new intersection has to be proposed, analyze it in terms of what kind of diversity of the program is contained into the bubble, and what is the similarity or the compatibility of the programs that are present at the moment on that bubble, and that determines certain coefficients. Each one of them applies to one time band. That determines the amount and the type of program that had to be inserted within the bubble, and using also the construction, the geometry of the bubble, it starts being applied on the site, as we see in the slide on your right. As perhaps you can see, there are different figures, different polygons that determine what's the program that is active at every time band throughout the 24 hours, resulting into something that is already turning into a building. It is quite interesting from the process that we've discovered throughout the research, that it erases the border between what is the urban strategy and the precision of the architecture. So basically, by repeating this loop of deterritorializing, operating mechanically, reterritorializing several times, we can almost go from an urban strategy to the design of a detail. Let's go fast. This is another project that is based on the analysis of the flow regime on the site, that is mapped in these valves that you see on your right, that basically grow in height depending on the intensity of the flow. This is based on also statistics from the council, and that also orient themselves depending on what the main direction of the flow is. So that is what we can call the deterritorialized construction, then based on an intention of avoiding. There is an estimate of the amount of people that will, that is also an estimate from the city council on the amount of people that have to be or will be visiting the area once the proposed developments are completed. So based on that estimates, the student produces a code that tends to correct the site in applying a certain number of instructions to each one of the squares that were each one of the valves that were before shown on your right. So this chart that you see on your right is basically the chart that resumes the instructions that have to be applied on the urban assemblage. They have this form here, and they include different actions that have to be taken, like, for example, what kind of visitor have to be attracted to the area. There is quite an interesting classification of visitors, daily work, daily visitors, leisure, leisure single visitors, etc. So there is a certain classification of the different type of visitors that will go, that have been estimated, that will flow through the area. And there are also instructions in terms of the size of the channel where this flow will go through, the sinuosity of the channel, what is mapped as a degree of friction with the borders of the channel, etc., etc. And by applying these codes on specific sites, so this is the code that responds to one of these squares that then is readjusted to fit the urban structure following also certain rules. It starts producing these traces, these patterns that basically are the code that the project proposes to operate on different places on the site. So I hope that this is enough to explain basically what we aim at, what we are aiming at in the development of these what we call practices of exteriority. And I would just like to make one remark of the results that we are obtaining of these experiments, which is that most of the strategies that we see appearing are strategies of coherence, are strategies that apply one machine, one structure to the urban field, and that structure produces differential qualities in the site once it is applied to a differentiated site. So that is for us a source of interest, because it is in a way an interesting articulation of how global processes or coherent strategies might be able to produce differences instead of simply looking at differences as almost representational or linguistic variations. So now I would like to leave the word to Farshid, who is going to explain how maybe some of these processes have been also used to make the project that is next door.
The slide. I need a new one. Oh, no, this one. Okay. Yeah, and just a little bit of that. It's either everything or nothing. Okay. Sorry. But is it the white one that I have to press? The blue. Right. Yokohama was a competition that we entered earlier this year. As Alan explained, we won the competition. I'll start explaining a little bit about the site. Yokohama is the largest international port in Japan with a population of 30 million. It is 30 kilometers from Tokyo, and it developed at the time of Japan's opening in 1859 around the Kanai district and its harbor. So this being the Kanai district and the harbor. The site being the Osambashi Pier, marked in blue, is standing now in the same position as the first ever pier that was built to deal with foreign trade in 1859, and that makes the site have a certain historical value, as well as being also the image that is presented to tourists as being basically the symbol of Yokohama, that being the pier with the landmark tower, the largest tower in Japan, and Mount Fuji in the background. Sorry. The site borders to the north. I should have really explained it in the previous one, but to the north, the harbor, and the south, the Kanai district, which is the center, the business and the commercial center of Yokohama at the moment. To the right, which you don't see in this slide anymore, would be one of the main parks called Yamashita Park, and to the left would be, maybe this explains it better. So to the right would be Yamashita Park, the harbor. To the north, to the south would be the Kanai district, the commercial and business district center of Yokohama, and to the left, the Shinko district, where the red brick park and a whole series of park structures are now being developed. Yokohama has also the ambition to decentralize Tokyo's business center by having a series of developments here in the Minato Mirai district, together with enhancing a series of green spaces along the waterfront that would bring the citizens of Yokohama closer to the bay. The brief asked for 48,000 square meters of program, that being 17,000 square meters of passenger facilities, 13,000 square meters of citizens facilities, and 18,000 square meters of traffic facilities to house 53,000 passengers every year. I should also explain that the project has the ambition of creating not only a ferry terminal, but a ferry terminal that creates also a public space to be enjoyed by the citizens of the city. And we started by looking at the site and observing that there were a series of park structures that were suddenly interrupted by the presence of the pier, those being Yamashita Park, Zonohana Park, Akaranega Park, and a red brick park which is also being designed. And this pier was basically interrupting the connection between all of these. Another interesting factor for us in the brief was the concept of Niva Minato, which was given to us. This meant that the pier had to provide two different meanings, one for the passengers arriving to the pier, and also for the citizens, the locals. So two different meanings for the locals and the foreigners. So we started looking at the site, and as I said earlier, and having been given also this concept of Niva Minato, we decided that the part of the pier, or the part of the project that was to relate to the city, was going to become a garden, a landscape or an urban ground that would encourage urban events by this redefinition of it as a garden. And so being faced with this problem of having to create a certain amount of urbanity on this pier, which was to become the main public space, we started looking at the structure of the city surrounding the pier, and discovered that urban structures tend to be either inductive or conductive in nature. Inductive would be the typical street plan, which caters for displacement between different locations within the urban structure, and the other kind would be inductive, which would not only accommodate flows, but would also create a certain amount of urban intensity purely by the accumulation of paths, a certain multiplicity of paths that have also different directions. Very much like we sort of compared it to the idea of a solenoid. So at this point, we made the decision to declare that this park was going to become the northern solenoid, that it had to have this multiplicity of different paths and different directions as a way of projecting urban intensity into the bay, as the first projection of urbanity inside Yokohama Bay. Following that, we made also a first programmatic decision, which was to reverse what appeared to us first the natural placement of the citizens' facilities and the passenger facilities. That was to reverse and place the citizens' facilities at the end of the pier and the passenger facilities at the urban fringe, in order to somehow activate a certain tension between them and to encourage this number of paths that were almost necessary to make our solenoid happen. Next was that after having decided on this first location of the program of the passengers and the citizens, we again went back to the structure of the pier and thought that it couldn't be the typical structure of a pier like the Santa Monica Pier or the Brighton Pier, where you have a cul-de-sac situation, where you go to the end of the pier and you return following back your footsteps through the same set of sequences, and therefore analyzed the different parts of the brief and organized the system of circulation of the building as a set of interconnected loops that would bifurcate constantly off of each other. So if I take you through an example, the only through road would be if you arrive from the city and you are a passenger, and so you go through a set of sequences and get out through the ferry. And if you are if you're not traveling, you would have an endless variations of sequences to take. So you could enter the transport plaza, the terminal, exit through one of the bifurcations, enter into the shops, the whole of Civic Exchange, exit through the restaurants, back to the plaza and to the city, and otherwise you would enter to the parking, exit to the terminal, bifurcate through the shops, etc., etc. So this diagram for us, we call it the no return diagram, which meant that you never have to follow back your footsteps, and it produced a basic diagram for the building. Next was how to produce the form in which this diagram would happen. Our first intuition was to literally rotate the program of Yamashita Park onto the bay. That was Yamashita Park, this park which was 90 degrees to the pier, except that it would this rotation would have to produce an urban space substantially different to Yamashita Park, because Yamashita Park is a flat green park, and to complement it, it would be more interesting to have a different type of public space, and simply because of its situation, having a huge and magnificent exposure to the harbor, it would be a more important and significant public space than Yamashita Park. So just like the diagram of the building came from analyzing the brief, having made certain programmatic decisions, the instrument for us became the site, which was to choose the urban ground as a device, and to think of it literally as an extension, the ground becoming extended and housing the volume of the terminal, and taking the diagram of the no-return diagram and translating each of the linear bifurcations into the bifurcation of the surface. And out of the two examples that you see on the left, we chose the bottom one, the one where the surface stays as continuous as possible, but bifurcates. Oh, I made a mistake. Let me go back. How do you go back? I need to go back here and forward here. Yeah. No, that was fine. No, forward. And then, oh God, no, I'm sorry, I made a mistake again. Forward here. You didn't do it. Okay. Yeah. Right. So to produce, so having declared that the instrument was going to be the ground or the surface of the ground extended, we had to now find how do we produce the particularities of the surface. We found it impossible to resort to typologies, and we thought that to produce it, perhaps another way of doing it would be to think that the landscape, the particularities would come from the functional requirements of the terminal. So this meant that somehow the terminal had to become as some kind of horizontal layer between the level of the plaza on top and the level of the apron, which was a service layer at the ground level, which had to be left for services. And therefore we simply started by producing transversal sections that followed the functional requirements. On the right, you see a series of sections that shows the variation of the form. And if I explain more clearly here, having already decided that the terminal facilities were going to be towards the city, and the passenger terminal, the citizens' facilities at the end, we already had made a series of decisions, which meant that we knew exactly what level the terminal had to be, because the cruise decks were fixed, were given to us as being 5 meters above ground level. Next, the traffic plaza, again, we were required to provide a traffic plaza of a certain amount of square meters. This had to keep to that area, but also make sure that from the route of the pier, you would get to the entry to the terminal with a slope of 6%. Inside the terminal, we followed simply the sort of topological diagram that we were given, which was to house first a domestic passenger hall, control places for domestic travel, immigration, customs, CIQ, immigration, departure and arrival hall for international travel, and then you would exit to the cruise deck. And at the end, we placed the whole of civic exchange, which was a single room that faced the sea with the restaurants and the shops surrounding it. Also, the bifurcations from the no-return diagram already gave us a series of cuts in the surface that produced entrances into the various independent entrances to various programs. First being entrance to the cruise terminal, the next 4 being bifurcations that allowed visitors and visitors traveling and their accompanies to go up to the cruise decks on the plaza and wave goodbye to them, and 2 further bifurcations that allowed you to enter the shops and then the whole of civic exchange. So if we can talk of layers, because they would be all one single surface that is bifurcated, the project would be composed of 4 layers. The previous one that I showed you was the layer of the plaza on top, the terminal directly below it, directly below that the apron level, which is left for allowing for services, luggage handling, and services up to the citizens' functions like shops and restaurants, and parking, which was a 3-meter height that we were allowed to excavate within the pier. So it was for us at this point interesting that the form that was generated was able to somehow mediate between the different sections, articulate the passengers' facilities and the citizens in a differential mode, removing the kind of segmentations that you normally get in facilities or in buildings that are dedicated to the maintenance of borders, and that we manage perhaps to deterritorialize both requirements of the program. That was to produce a public space that wrapped around a terminal and neglecting its value or its presence as a symbol or as a gate, and producing at the same time a functional structure, being the terminal that became the cast for this unestranged or atopological public space. Next, we had to find how we would also construct it, how we could produce with the same idea the system of constructions, and we basically proposed that the same system that produced the folds, the programmatic folds, would repeat at a different scale to produce the system of construction. In other words, we avoided any kind of differentiation between load-bearing and non-load-bearing elements, and proposed that the whole thing would be made out of corrugated steel sheets of 5 millimeters that would be waved in sinusoidal waves. You would see it on this diagram, and that would be folded again at a larger scale when you need greater structural strength. So the surface is folded again and supports itself, removing any necessity for coded elements such as columns or walls. On the left, you see an axonometric of the form, showing where there is greater structural strength needed, and therefore where the folds, the larger folds, occur. I did the same mistake again. I'll just manage. Again, we also found that this idea of corrugation, the corrugation of the steel, kept the mass as light as possible, and steel itself being much lighter than concrete, and therefore it was relatively suitable, or actually quite suitable for earthquake, as an earthquake structure, because this lightness of the structure, together with the idea of the waved rib, the forming plates in two directions, would actually make the structure highly ductile. We also proposed that the structure would be mostly fabricated in sections in the factory, and would be brought to site to minimize disruption to the existing terminal. Then we had to deal with a different scale of programming, which would be the smaller set of programmatic requirements that we had to house. And I don't know which one to press, but the wrong one. Could I go back on the right, please? Thank you. So we thought of these smaller scale of programs as sediments of this flow that would be left literally in the folds left by these streams of people moving through this surface. And as you would see, you see quite clearly in these molds on the left that we had to make to produce the model, most of the folds are created where the majority of flow passes through, and the smaller scale of program was placed alongside these pleats. Therefore, this smaller scale would be the PR centers, the ticketing office, the luggage handling that would be placed alongside the main flow, so this being the traffic plaza, the domestic terminal, international, and then the citizens' facilities at the end. And as you see on the axonometric, they are placed along the sort of stream of people passing through to get on to board the ships. A further idea that we proposed was to basically acknowledge that this building will not be fixed in terms of its requirements of international and domestic space, and we proposed that what created the border conditions would not be fixed elements, but that would be collapsible or mobile, those being the immigration and the custom and the ticketing office. And this made the single surface idea even more suitable at this stage, because it meant that since the space is one, we could simply move these collapsible or mobile elements and vary the amount of space that was dedicated to domestic or international. So as 3 examples would be the typical case which we were asked to provide, these being the proportion of the flat gray as completely domestic space, and the one with the dots being the international. And if all the ships that were arriving would be domestic, then all of these borders would be taken away and all of the space would be declared as being domestic. Or as a third version, where the international space would be smaller than the typical diagram, and the domestic would be slightly increased. We call this a battlefield, where very much like westerns, these barriers would be placed at canyons, and there would be this battlefield of locals and foreigners. Then the other layers being the plaza at the very top, and they're not kind of in order anymore, but the apron, where, as I explained before, would be mainly for servicing. Some of the pleats that come down to the apron and support the building, also taking the luggages up to the terminal, and at the end, again, some of them give you access for apron boarding and servicing to the restaurants and the shops. And I've already talked about the parking. Then we try to imagine how the surface of the plaza would be occupied. So having dealt with, let's say, the programming of the terminal, following the functional requirements given by the brief, this landscape had to, in a way, remain open as a surface of registration of Yokohama citizens, in a way interpreting this public space. And we had to, in a way, try to test this surface and open the Japanese calendar and try to imagine the various different seasonal events that could occupy the various topographical conditions on the surface. For example, how a bean scattering ceremony could be performed at the tip of the pier, or a flower viewing party in spring could be made along the ridge, or how sports facilities could be made on the plateau, which is the flat area of the surface. I made the same mistake. And basically, having generated the form, we were left only to look at the set of situations or sequences that we had already devised. If I just go through them relatively quickly. Entering through the transport plaza on the right, on the left you see a view from the sea. The first bifurcation of the traffic plaza on the left, where you have the choice of entering into the terminal, or on the right the terminal, and at the first bifurcation entering, going up to the public space. As a further bifurcation from the terminal, you would be able to apron board from the apron, and on the right, otherwise you would go straight ahead to the cruise deck and board on the ship. I went one too many. A further bifurcation in the terminal would be if a person is accompanying you when you travel, and they would enter the terminal with you, but exit up to the surface to wave goodbye to you. And if you have gone already on the plaza without entering the terminal, you would have a further bifurcation to take to enter the shops and restaurants that I already showed you previously, or go further ahead to enter the Hall of Civic Exchange, the restaurant and the Hall of Civic Exchange. And at this point, I would like to leave you with the animation.
Yeah, I think the animation is relatively long, so maybe we can.
I'll have to go to take questions while the animation plays. Follow the questions and switch on the animation. Switch off the slide. Un momento. I don't want my hand to be shown.
No, but especially if you see the saturation and the overflow of codes that we are bombarded with, if you see that, for example, in a city like London or like New York, a city that is part, or a social construct that is part of the domain that we were trying to describe at the beginning of the lecture, perhaps it is the best mechanism that we can use to as a vehicle of consensus, as a vehicle of discussion, is the pure spatial construct that we have. We are, for example, fascinated with highway codes and traffic systems, because they are in a way systems that enable to produce a certain consensus, a certain coherence between a mass of people that don't necessarily have the same cultural background, etc., etc. And these type of systems are not necessarily less specific than systems of representation or cultural systems. If, for example, if you go and drive in Holland, the rule of giving way to your right, which is a rule that is relatively universal, is enhanced. So basically, what that implies is that at any point within the territory that you are driving through, there is no predominance of any acts. There is no priority of certain roads in respect to other roads. If you drive in France or in Spain, for example, Napoleonic countries, you see that there is a very clear spatial structure that tells you that certain roads have priority in respect to other roads. I think to think about this type of structure, instead of keep on trying to produce significance, or to produce something through the regurgitating coded material, is quite an exciting possibility, we think.
I mean, I think we have to, I mean, maybe I should add that it doesn't mean that cultural issues or political issues are not important, but that as an architect, to operate, you have to translate them spatially. And that's why we think that spatial organizations or spatial devices are, after all, the only tool for an architect. And that's what we are interested in researching.
Mr. Caruso?
I find it sort of troubling, and we've been thinking about similar things, and ultimately I can't believe an architecture of pure space, and an architecture of a sort of an empty architecture, a symbolically empty architecture that is proposing. I think on this site there's an incredible cultural resonance by proposing this project. And in ways it's a specific project for your polemic. And the project is quite wonderful. But I think highway codes are full of culture, actually. Yeah. And I don't understand why you're willing to give space and to give credence to highway codes, because it's the fundamental framework that we see in this. And those are equal, right? And we would give much more weight to the sort of basic framework that we find in the fabric of, say, European cities. Yeah, the European cities are very different from Japanese cities, and very different from American cities, certainly. And I find your example of the Rorschach pattern very interesting, because I think that building has a kind of framework that's lurking within them, and separated from symbolism and signification. Yeah, kind of urban structure has a kind of perseverance, and that's because of the fabric and the materiality and the shape of the
dubious in whose opinion?
The question is, how would you respond? The question is,
Well, the question is, don't you see that ultimately there's a danger in assessing?
no, that's the question.
Yes, there is a danger, but that's probably why maybe I mean it's a research. When you do a research, you have somehow to freeze all the other hypotheses to be able to experiment with the one that you are aiming at. I don't know if it is possible to devoid architecture from any pre-coded material, but we are certainly interested in it. In fact, it is very interesting that the question that we get systematically in every press conference in Japan is, what is the idea? So we've learned by now that we have to say the building is like the wave of Hokusai. And then they say, they understand that so I mean, I think that is in a way the richness of the project is that there can be the wave of Hokusai or a magic carpet or whatever you want to read into it, but that what gives the project, what gives the topography the enough ambiguity to be read in different ways is precisely the fact that this engineered trying to avoid resonance of constructed codes. I think it would have been a mistake to look at the structure of Yokohama, for example, and try to derive certain or to identify certain specificities of the structure of the physical structure of Yokohama to implement the project. I think what is interesting of the project is that it doesn't carry the weight of previous codes. But it's obviously an experiment. I mean, we don't know either if it's going to work. That's what we are trying to do also in the unit.
You showed some possible variations of some use of space design, depending on domestic or national cover. Is there also built into your idea of the code that there might be other variations, quite different types of the form and the use of the space of the whole building over time, not just moving around to top up space of the national versus national passenger compartment, but that you would, for example, allow later on a quite different transformation into some part of the space? Or is your idea, as it were, once you make topography, that people can play on the topography, but they don't change, they can't change the topography?
But the advantage of the topography is that it's actually not it is determined by a set of programmatic devices, but actually is not typologically determined. And that is quite interesting, because when we were doing the project, we were always talking about picnics. And in a way, to visit the project is like going into a picnic, where you see a group of people who go into a topography that is not designed, is not constructed to allocate specific use in specific locations, but actually people, depending on their inclination, end up locating themselves within that topography.
They wouldn't take new material or change the topography specifically. They could react to it, but not physically change it.
Well, you can never stop them. But that was not part of the proposal. Well, for the purpose of production of the project, no, that's not foreseen. But it happens in every building.
In a way, the building is almost like an infrastructure. What happens inside? No, but I would like, and that relates to the same question that we were mentioning during the presentation. We would like to be able, at least, to say to a certain degree, how things have to be placed. And that's related to the idea of control that we are interested in implementing.
Yes.
Let me just say that this computer is actually a video, and the actual computer, which we were not able to assemble enough numbers to actually project on one of the machines, is actually scintillating. Equally scintillating will be the follow-up tomorrow evening at 7 o'clock by Jeff Kipnis and Bram Chappelle. Farshid, Moussavi, and Alejandro, Polo, thank you very much indeed.
I explained it very badly. Huh?
If you already know the project, you explain it well. If you don't know the project, it didn't count. But it's always true, it's all, don't worry about it. I thought the first part, was very good, very clear. I mean, that was to show your students' work, but I mean,